My mom canceled my birthday to take her golden child on a lavish shopping spree like I was completely invisible, so I finally took a stand and walked out of their lives. What happened after that made her, my stepdad, and even my sister deeply regret everything they did to me. My 18th birthday felt like a casual oversight. Instead of being the focus of my own narrative, I was relegated to the background in a home dominated by my sister Katie and my mom. What should have been a significant milestone simply became another Saturday at home. Only this time I was tasked with looking after my younger brother, Charlie, while everyone else brushed aside my plans as trivial. My dad passed away 2 years prior, a car accident on his way home from work one evening. Before that, things were relatively stable, I suppose. My parents weren't perfect, but they maintained a balance. My dad was the calm, steady presence, and my mom was more impulsive, yet it functioned. After Dad's death, however, everything shifted. Mom leaned heavily on Katie, my younger sister, for emotional support, or perhaps it was the other way around. Regardless, Katie became the epicenter of Mom's world, and I was simply present. Katie, at 15, is the kind of person who monopolizes attention. She's loud, dramatic, and possesses an uncanny knack for transforming the slightest inconvenience into a monumental crisis. A perfect example. 3 days before my birthday, Katie ended things with her boyfriend, Justin. They'd been together for a grand total of 4 months, and judging by her tears, you'd think she'd just gone through a divorce. She barricaded herself in her room, blasted melancholic music, and refused to speak to anyone except Mom. Initially, I didn't give it much thought. Katie's emotional outbursts are like bad weather. You learn to just endure them. But by Friday night, things took a turn. Mom decided Katie required a distraction, and the apparent best way to provide that was to cancel my birthday plans and take her on a weekend retreat to a friend's mountain house, followed by a shopping spree. The house isn't ours. It belongs to Mom's friend, who allows her to use it whenever she wishes. It's their go-to spot when Katie needs a reset. When Mom delivered the news, I was livid. I had arrangements to go out with my friends, and Mom was supposed to finance it. Nothing extravagant, just dinner and perhaps a movie, then a small gathering at home with cake. I had been anticipating it for weeks, especially since I hadn't celebrated my last birthday. But no, Katie's breakup was seemingly more crucial than my birthday. I attempted to object, reminding Mom it was my birthday and questioning why Katie's drama had to take precedence. Her reply: "Katie's really struggling right now, and you're old enough to understand. We'll celebrate when I get back." That was it. No discussion, no room for negotiation. To make matters worse, she added that I'd need to stay home to watch Charlie, my 6-year-old brother. I tried to express my desire for my birthday to matter for once, but Mom wouldn't hear it. She threatened to cut off my college fund if I didn't comply. So there I was, stuck at home with Charlie while they packed and departed. Now, I adore Charlie. He's a sweet child and the only person in this house who doesn't treat me as if I'm invisible. But he's 6. He demands constant attention and possesses an endless well of energy that makes it impossible to relax even for a moment. Babysitting him isn't something you simply add to someone's weekend agenda, especially not their birthday weekend. By Saturday morning, I was a blend of anger, disappointment, and resignation. Mom and Katie left early, with Mom tossing me a quick, "Make sure Charlie eats lunch," as they walked out the door. They didn't even wish me a happy birthday, not once. I stood in the doorway, holding back tears, watching their car vanish down the street. The day itself was a blur of canceled plans and efforts to entertain Charlie. My friends were texting, asking what time they should arrive, and I had to awkwardly explain that the party was off. Most of them were understanding, but I could tell some were irritated. I couldn't blame them. They'd altered their plans for me, and now I was backing out because my family didn't care enough to grant me one day for myself. Charlie, at least, was oblivious to the entire situation. He was ecstatic to have me all to himself and spent the day showcasing his latest Lego creations and coercing me into playing hide-and-seek. I tried to make the best of it for his sake, but it was difficult to shake the bitterness. Every time my phone chimed with a birthday message, it felt like a reminder of how much I was missing out on. Around lunchtime, I decided to order pizza as a small treat for myself. It felt pathetic, sitting on the couch with a slice of pepperoni while Charlie watched cartoons, but at least it was something. At one point, Charlie handed me a birthday card he'd made with crayons. It featured a drawing of the two of us holding hands, with "Happy Birthday" scrawled across the top in shaky letters. That card was the sole bright spot in an otherwise miserable day. By the time Charlie went to bed, I was utterly drained. I tried to lift my spirits by watching a movie I'd been wanting to see, but it didn't help. The house felt too quiet, and the weight of everything simply settled heavily on my chest. I kept checking my phone, half hoping Mom or Katie would call to wish me a happy birthday, or at least check in. But there was nothing, not a single word from them. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying the day. It wasn't just about the birthday, it was about everything. The years of being ignored, the constant sacrifices, the way Katie always came first no matter what. I realized I'd spent so much time attempting to be the understanding one that I'd allowed them to exploit me. And for what? They clearly didn't appreciate it. I didn't know what the solution was yet, but I knew I couldn't continue living like this. Something had to change. Perhaps not tomorrow, maybe not even next week, but someday. I deserved better than this. That was the last thought in my head as I drifted off to sleep, exhausted and emotionally drained from a day that was supposed to be about celebrating me but ended up being just another reminder of how little I mattered to them. An unexpected arrival my birthday was a disaster, but the day after was a plot twist I didn't anticipate. I was still processing everything that had happened, or more accurately, everything that hadn't happened. The house was quiet, save for the sound of Charlie playing with his toys in the living room. I was trying to keep busy, tidying up the mess from the previous day, when the doorbell rang. Now, our doorbell rarely rings unless it's a package delivery or a neighbor needing something, so I wasn't expecting much. I opened the door, and there he was. Uncle Dave, my dad's younger brother. I almost didn't recognize him at first. It had been a couple of years since I'd seen him, and he looked different. Older, a bit grayer around the edges. He was carrying a suitcase in one hand and a box of donuts in the other. I just stood there for a moment stunned. Uncle Dave at my house without warning? This was new. Happy belated birthday, kiddo, he said with a grin, handing me the donuts. Thought you could use some company. I didn't even know how to respond. Uncle Dave and I had always gotten along, but he lived a few states away and wasn't exactly the type to drop in for surprise visits. He stepped inside, looking around as if verifying everything was all right. Before I could ask why he was there, Charlie ran over, squealing with excitement. Uncle Dave scooped him up as if he'd been practicing for this moment. After the initial commotion of greetings and hugs, I finally had a chance to ask the big question. So, what brings you here? Uncle Dave gave me a look that was both serious and empathetic. I heard about your birthday, he said. Didn't sound like much of a celebration. At that point, my stomach dropped. I knew exactly who told him. My Aunt Sharon, Dad's older sister. She's the one family member who still checks in on us from time to time, mostly through text. She'd messaged me the day before, asking how my birthday was, and I'd given her the condensed version. Apparently, she didn't buy it. Uncle Dave sat me down in the kitchen, opened the box of donuts, and told me to start talking. At first, I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? That my mom and sister abandoned me on my birthday? That I spent the day babysitting instead of celebrating? It felt trivial to complain, but he wasn't letting it go. Kid, if you don't tell me, I'll just call Sharon, and you know she'll spill everything anyway, he said, raising an eyebrow. So I told him. I recounted Katie's meltdown over her breakup, how Mom canceled my birthday plans to take her on a getaway, and how I was left to care for Charlie. I even mentioned how they didn't bother to call or wish me a happy birthday the entire day. Uncle Dave listened quietly, nodding occasionally, but mostly just allowing me to vent. By the time I finished, I was a little surprised at how much I'd said. I guess I'd been holding it in for longer than I realized. Well, that's some great BS, he finally said, leaning back in his chair. Pardon my French, but seriously. I couldn't help but laugh a little. Uncle Dave has always been frank like that, and honestly, it was refreshing. He didn't sugarcoat things or try to make excuses for Mom and Katie. He just called it as he saw it. What's the plan now, he asked. Plan. I repeated, confused. Yeah, the plan. You can't keep letting them treat you like this, he said. So, what's your next move? I didn't have an answer. I'd spent so much time just enduring this family dynamic that the idea of having a plan never crossed my mind. Uncle Dave must have seen the uncertainty on my face because he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Pack a bag, he said. You're coming with me. At first, I thought he was joking. What? I can't just leave. What about Charlie? We'll figure it out, he said, dismissing my concern as if it were nothing. But you're not staying here. Not after this. It felt too sudden, too drastic. But the more I considered it, the more it made sense. What was truly keeping me here? Mom and Katie clearly didn't care about me the way they should, and Charlie, while I loved him, wasn't my responsibility. I deserved a chance to focus on myself for once, and Uncle Dave was offering me that chance on a silver platter. Still, it wasn't an easy decision. What if Mom got mad, or tried to stop me? What if she really cut off my college fund? Uncle Dave snorted. Don't worry. I'm here for you. Let her try. I'd like to see her explain to the rest of the family why she's so upset about her kid getting a better shot at life. That made me smile. Uncle Dave had a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of things. He didn't care about drama or appearances. He just wanted what was best for me. I told him I needed a little time to think it over, and he didn't push. Instead, he stayed the rest of the day hanging out with Charlie and me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. By the time evening arrived, I'd made up my mind. I packed a small bag with the essentials, clothes, my laptop, a few personal items, and got ready to leave. When Mom and Katie returned later that night, they were surprised to see Uncle Dave, and by surprised, I mean completely caught off guard. Mom tried to act polite, but you could tell she was annoyed. Katie barely acknowledged him, still engrossed in her post-breakup sulking. Uncle Dave wasted no time. He sat Mom down and laid it all out for her. How I felt, how she'd been treating me, and why I deserved better. I didn't stay for most of the conversation. He told me to wait in the living room with Charlie, but I could hear bits and pieces through the walls. Mom's voice started out defensive, but quickly shifted to something more subdued. By the time Uncle Dave walked out, she didn't say a word to stop me from leaving. "Ready?" he asked, grabbing my bag. I nodded, and just like that, we were out the door. As we drove away, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, guilt, hope. It was all swirling around in my head, but more than anything, I felt free. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I was finally taking control of my own life, and it was all thanks to Uncle Dave showing up when I needed him most. A new chapter and a shocking revelation moving in with Uncle Dave felt like stepping into an entirely different existence. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't some fairy tale where everything magically improved overnight. His house was nothing fancy, a small 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood, but it felt more like home than my actual house ever did. The first thing he did after we arrived was hand me a key and say, "This is your home now. Make yourself comfortable." That resonated with me more deeply than I expected. No one had ever said that to me before, at least not in a way that felt so genuine. The first few days were a blend of awkwardness and relief. Uncle Dave had a rather simple routine. He worked weekdays at an auto repair shop he co-owned with a friend and spent his evenings unwinding with TV or tinkering on old car projects in the garage. He wasn't one to hover or bombard me with questions, which I appreciated. Instead, he gave me space to settle in and figure things out for myself. One of the first things I noticed about living with him was how quiet everything felt. Back at home, it was always chaos. Katie screaming about one thing or another, Mom rushing around trying to keep up with her demands, Charlie needing attention every 5 seconds. Here, the loudest sound was the ticking of the clock in the kitchen. It was strange at first, but also quite pleasant. Uncle Dave had a knack for making the little things feel significant. The day after I moved in, he took me grocery shopping and told me to grab anything I liked. When I hesitated, saying I didn't want to overdo it, he just shrugged and said, "You're not a guest, kid. Stock up." It was such a small gesture, but it meant a lot. Back at home, Mom was always so stingy with money when it came to me, yet somehow Katie always got whatever she desired. Knowing I didn't have to fight for scraps anymore was a relief I didn't realize I needed. The biggest adjustment was school. I was in my senior year, so transferring this late wasn't ideal, but Uncle Dave insisted it would be worth it. He even accompanied me to the school office to get everything sorted. Watching him interact with the staff was eye-opening. He was firm but polite, ensuring I received all the help I needed without coming across as pushy. It made me realize how much I'd been lacking that kind of support in my life. My first day at the new school was nerve-wracking. I didn't know anyone, and walking into a building full of strangers made me feel like I had a neon sign over my head that said "New Girl." But the school had a surprisingly relaxed vibe, and by the end of the week, I'd managed to make a few friends. Nothing too close yet, but enough to feel like I wasn't completely alone. Uncle Dave was always checking in, but in a way that didn't feel stifling. He'd ask how school was going or if I needed anything, but he never pried too much. One night, I came home from a long day and found him in the garage working on some old motorcycle that looked like it hadn't run in decades. "Rough day?" he asked without looking up. "Not rough, just a lot," I said, leaning against the door frame. He nodded, still focused on the bike. "Yeah, moving to a new place is never easy, but you'll get the hang of it. You're tougher than you think." That stayed with me. I'd never considered myself tough, but hearing him say it made me feel like maybe I could handle more than I gave myself credit for. One weekend, Uncle Dave surprised me with a day trip to a nearby hiking trail. I'm not exactly an outdoorsy person, but he insisted it would be fun. We packed some sandwiches and drove out to the trailhead early in the morning. It was a relatively easy hike, and the view at the top was incredible. I remember sitting on a rock, looking out at the trees and mountains and thinking, this is what peace feels like. On the way back, we stopped at this tiny diner for lunch. It was one of those places where the waitress knows everyone by name and the menu hasn't changed in decades. Uncle Dave ordered a massive stack of pancakes, and when I gave him a look, he just said, "What? Pancakes aren't just for breakfast." That was the thing about him. He had a way of making everything feel light and easy, even when things were heavy. He didn't lecture me or try to solve all my problems. He just let me be myself, which was exactly what I needed. As the weeks passed, I started to feel more like myself again. I wasn't constantly stressed. I could actually breathe. I even started performing better in school, which was a shock to me, and probably would have been to my teachers back in my old school too. Uncle Dave noticed, and made a point to acknowledge it. "See? Told you you're tougher than you think," he said one night when I showed him a paper I received an A on. There were still difficult days, of course. I missed Charlie a lot, and there were moments when I felt guilty for leaving him behind. But every time I began to doubt my decision, I'd remind myself why I left in the first place. I deserved a chance to focus on myself, and I couldn't do that in a house where I was always second place. One night, as we were watching some old action movie on TV, Uncle Dave turned to me and said, "You know your dad would be proud of you." That caught me off guard. I didn't talk about my dad much, partly because it still hurt, and partly because I didn't want to seem like I was seeking sympathy. But hearing Uncle Dave say that meant more to me than I could articulate. "Thanks," I mumbled, not trusting myself to say much more without getting emotional. "Don't thank me," he said. "You're the one doing the work. I'm just here to make sure you've got the space to do it." And that's exactly what he did. It was a regular Tuesday night when I received the email. I was sitting at Uncle Dave's kitchen table, finishing up some homework, when my phone buzzed. The subject line read, "I owe you an apology." I didn't even have to check who it was from, Mom. I stared at the screen for a while, debating whether to open it. It had been months since I'd left, and in that time, I hadn't heard much from her or Katie. Honestly, I hadn't really expected to. Mom wasn't exactly the type to admit she was wrong, and I figured she'd decided to just let me go quietly. But here it was, an apology, or at least I hoped it was. When I finally opened it, the message was lengthy, like essay length. She started by acknowledging that she'd been unfair to me and admitting that my leaving had compelled her to reflect on how she'd treated me. She wrote that she'd been carrying guilt ever since Uncle Dave showed up and confronted her. She admitted she'd been too focused on Katie, too quick to push me aside, and too blind to see how it affected me. At first, it all sounded good, almost too good to be true. But as I continued reading, the tone shifted. She began talking about how hard things had been for her since Dad died, how overwhelmed she'd felt trying to raise 3 kids on her own, and how she'd relied on Katie because she understood her better. It felt like she was justifying everything, even if she didn't intend it that way. Then she dropped the real bombshell. She wrote, "There's something I never told you, but I think you deserve to know now. When I was pregnant with you, your father had an affair." I had to read that line 3 times before it fully registered. My dad, my rock, my hero, had cheated on her while she was pregnant with me. It felt like someone had pulled the rug out from under me. She went on to explain that while she'd forgiven Dad eventually, she'd never truly let go of the anger, and somehow that anger had been redirected at me. She said she didn't even realize it at first, but every time she looked at me, she was reminded of that time in her life, of the betrayal, the arguments, the humiliation. She admitted that it wasn't fair, and that it wasn't my fault. She said she hated herself for treating me differently, but by the time she realized how much damage she'd done, she didn't know how to fix it. The email concluded with her asking for a second chance, saying she wanted to rebuild our relationship. She didn't want to lose me forever. I didn't know how to feel. I was angry, sure, but there was also this strange sense of relief. For years, I'd been trying to figure out why she treated me the way she did, why I was always second place no matter what I did. And now I finally had an answer. It didn't make it okay, but at least it made sense. I reread the email a few more times that night, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to respond right away, to tell her exactly how much she'd hurt me, but another part of me didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a reply. After everything I'd been through, did she really deserve a second chance? Or was this just another way for her to alleviate her own guilt? I ended up calling Uncle Dave. I hadn't told him about the email yet, but I figured he'd have some sound advice. When I explained everything, he was quiet for a moment before saying, "Look, kid, it's up to you whether you want to open that door, but just remember, an apology doesn't erase what happened. It's okay to take your time." That stuck with me. I didn't have to rush into anything. I could process this on my own terms, without feeling pressured to forgive her just because she said sorry. So that's what I did. I took my time. In the end, I decided not to respond. Not yet anyway. I wasn't ready to forgive her, and I didn't want to open up a conversation that I wasn't prepared to have. I needed more time to figure out what I wanted, not just for myself, but for our relationship moving forward. Uncle Dave was supportive of my decision. He reminded me that it was okay to prioritize my own healing, even if it meant maintaining my distance. "She's the one who made those choices," he said. "Now she has to live with the consequences. You don't owe her anything." That was the most important thing I needed to hear. For so long, I'd felt like I had to be the bigger person, like it was my responsibility to maintain peace. But it wasn't. Mom had made her choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. In the months that followed, I started to feel more at peace. I was performing better in school, making new friends, and even revisiting old hobbies like painting again. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally living for myself instead of trying to meet someone else's expectations. As for Mom, I didn't hear from her again after that email. I'm not sure if she gave up or if she was waiting for me to make the next move, but either way, the silence was somewhat pleasant. It reassured me that if she cared enough to make things right, she would have tried harder. I think her email was a turning point, not just for her, but for me too. It forced me to confront a lot of things I'd been avoiding, and while it didn't fix everything, it helped me start to let go of some of the anger I'd been holding on to for so long. Do I forgive her? Not yet. Maybe not ever. But at least now I know the truth, and for now, that's enough. The unforeseen loss meanwhile. Life with Uncle Dave had become my new normal, and for the first time in a long time, things felt stable. Being around him made me feel grounded. We had this unspoken understanding. It just worked. That's why the day everything changed felt like a punch to the chest. I wasn't ready for it. It was a Friday afternoon, school had let out early, and I'd stopped by a local bakery on my way home. Uncle Dave had a weakness for chocolate chip cookies, and I thought it would be nice to grab some for our usual Friday movie night. It was such a small thing, but it felt good to do something thoughtful for him, since he was always doing things for me. When I got home, the house was quiet. I figured he was still at the shop, finishing up for the day. It wasn't unusual for him to stay late to help with a tricky repair or catch up on paperwork. I sent him a quick text. Got cookies for tonight. Don't work too hard. Then I flopped onto the couch and turned on the TV to pass some time. Hours passed, and I started to wonder why he hadn't texted back. It wasn't like him to leave me on read. By 8 p.m., I started getting this uneasy feeling in my stomach. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. That wasn't like him either. He always kept his phone charged, especially in case I needed something. I told myself he was probably just caught up at work, maybe helping out a customer who came in late. But the worry wouldn't dissipate. At 9:30, the doorbell rang, and for a split second, I thought it was him. Maybe he'd forgotten his keys or was carrying something too heavy to open the door. But when I opened it, my heart sank. 2 police officers were standing there, their expressions grim. "Are you related to David?" one of them asked. "He's my uncle," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry to inform you that he passed away earlier today. There was a medical emergency at his workplace, a heart attack. Paramedics responded, but unfortunately, he didn't make it." I didn't hear much after that. The words "he didn't make it" just kept looping in my head, over and over. I remember nodding mechanically as they handed me some paperwork and offered their condolences. When they left, I closed the door and just stood there in the silence, trying to process what had just happened. Uncle Dave was gone. The man who had given me a home, who had become my safe place when I felt like I had nowhere else to go, was just gone. The next few days were a blur. Calls had to be made, arrangements had to be figured out, and I felt completely overwhelmed. I didn't even know where to begin. Uncle Dave didn't have kids or a spouse, so everything fell on me. I didn't feel ready to handle it all, but thankfully his best friend and business partner, Mike, stepped in to help. Mike was a reliable guy, no nonsense but with a good heart, and he made sure I didn't have to go through it alone. We spent hours at the funeral home, figuring out details like flowers and a service date. Every decision felt like a monumental task because I wanted to make sure it was something Uncle Dave would have approved of. The funeral was small but meaningful. People from all corners of Uncle Dave's life showed up. Friends, neighbors, coworkers. They shared stories about how he'd helped them in ways big and small, from fixing a broken furnace in the dead of winter to helping a struggling single mom with car repairs free of charge. He was the kind of guy who didn't just talk about being there for people, he actually showed up. Mom and Katie came to the funeral, though I wasn't sure why. They didn't seem particularly moved, and their presence felt more like an obligation than genuine grief. Mom gave me a stiff hug after the service and said, "If you need anything, just let me know." But it felt hollow. Katie barely spoke to me at all, which honestly, I was fine with. They didn't stay long, and when they left, it felt like a weight had been lifted. A few weeks later, I received a call from his lawyer. Uncle Dave had left me everything in his will, his house, his savings, and even his share of the repair shop. I was stunned. I'd known he cared about me, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. He hadn't just given me a home. He'd given me a future. It was overwhelming, to say the least. I was 18, still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life, and now I was responsible for managing an estate. Mike offered to buy out Uncle Dave's share of the shop, which was a relief. I trusted him to take care of it, and the sale gave me a financial cushion I never expected to have. Keeping the house was an easy decision. It was more than just a place to live. It was a piece of Uncle Dave. I couldn't imagine selling it, at least not yet. Living there alone felt strange at first, but over time I started to feel like he was still with me in a way. His presence was in the little things. The tools in the garage, the old leather jacket hanging in the closet, the way the floorboards creaked in just the right spots. Uncle Dave may have been gone, but everything he'd done for me, Every lesson, every kind word, every moment of quiet support stayed with me. He had believed in me when no one else did, and now it was up to me to carry that forward. The final confrontation, it had been a couple of months since Uncle Dave's funeral, and life was finally starting to feel somewhat stable again. Then out of nowhere, my mom called me. I stared at the screen for a solid minute before deciding to pick up. We hadn't spoken much since the funeral, and to be honest, I didn't really expect to. Our relationship wasn't exactly warm, and after years of feeling like an afterthought, I didn't have much energy left to try and mend it. Still, I picked up. "Hello," I said, trying to sound neutral. "Hi, sweetie," she said, her voice overly sweet, as if she was trying too hard. "How are you?" It was such a strange question coming from her. How was I? Did she genuinely want to know, or was she just trying to make small talk? I told her I was fine, and asked why she was calling. She hesitated for a moment before launching into what I could tell was a rehearsed speech. "Well, things have been a little tight around here," she began. "Katie is struggling with school, and Charlie's growing so fast. He needs new clothes every other week. And, well, you know how expensive everything is these days." I didn't respond right away. I could feel where this was leading, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was just venting. But then she hit me with it. "I was wondering," she said, her tone shifting to something more hesitant, "if you could help out a little. I know Dave left you everything, and I'm so glad he looked out for you, but we could really use some support right now." There it was. She wasn't calling to check on me. She wasn't calling to rebuild our relationship. She was calling for money. "I don't think I can do that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Uncle Dave left that money for me to build a future, not to fix everyone else's problems." Her tone shifted immediately. "I'm not asking for a lot," she said, her voice edging toward frustration. "Just a little to help us get through. You don't know how hard it's been trying to keep everything together on my own." I wanted to laugh. On her own? She hadn't been on her own since Dad died. Katie was her constant companion, and she'd always prioritized her needs above everyone else's. And as for Charlie, I'd been the one taking care of him most of the time before I left. If anyone had been left to fend for themselves, it was me. "I get that things are hard," I said carefully, "but that doesn't mean it's my responsibility to fix it. I've worked hard to get where I am, and Uncle Dave wanted me to have a chance at something better. I'm not going to give that up." She didn't take it well. "You're being selfish," she snapped. "Family is supposed to help each other. I can't believe you just turned your back on us like this." That hit a nerve. "Selfish," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "I've spent my whole life being the one who's overlooked. I was the babysitter, the quiet one, the kid who didn't matter as much as Katie. And now that I finally have something of my own, you want to take that from me too?" "No." "I'm done." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, probably trying to figure out how to respond. Finally, she sighed. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said, her tone colder now. "I just thought you'd want to help your family." And just like that, the conversation was over. She didn't even try to understand where I was coming from. It was all about what she wanted, as usual. I hung up feeling drained, but also a little proud of myself. For once, I hadn't backed down. I'd stood up for myself, and it felt good. A few days later, she texted me, apologizing for the way she'd spoken to me, but still asking if I'd reconsider. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. If she couldn't see why this was important to me, then no amount of explaining would change her mind. After that, I decided to cut contact for a while. I blocked her number and stopped checking for messages. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. I couldn't keep letting her guilt me into doing things that weren't right for me.